everybody. Welcome to the 36th Annual Forum on Tolerance. The topic, Thinking Outside the Gender Box, Insights into Being Transgender. I'm the chair of the Forum on Tolerance, Lori Carlson. Our last panel is entitled Stories from the Heart. I'm going to introduce all of our speakers in the order that they're going to speak. After they speak, there'll be an opportunity to ask questions. So starting with Marcia Garber. Marcia Garber is an activist, a parent of a trans child, and a member of Dignity Boston. Next, Gianni Lara is the oldest child of 5 and treasurer of Phi Theta Kappa Honor Society. He is graduating this spring from North Shore Community College. He has been accepted into Lesley University and plans to attend there in the fall. So we're very excited to have one of our students speak. And lastly, Steve Harrington. He's the executive director of NaGLY. He has been an active part of the gay community here in Boston and Denver for more than 30 years. He's been a columnist for The Guide Gay Magazine, among other endeavors. So our first speaker will be Marcia Garber. Thank you.
So my name is Marcia Garber, and I grew up and lived in Quincy my whole life, Quincy, Mass. And I'm trying to think where to begin. Well, first of all, thank you for the invitation to be here. I know I'm friends with Dave Houle, who works here at the school, and he's been working very hard to get this topic presented at the forum. I know over the years. I've been here before to the forum. In 2009, my husband and I came together. It was a forum on gay, something about gay. It's in the program, the history, 2009. And then last year I came for the forgiveness forum, which was really impressive. Forum on Tolerance, I'm really hoping and wishing that someday we can get to Forum on Acceptance, that we can move from tolerance to acceptance. I'm also hopeful over all of my years of being connected to this topic, hoping that we can get beyond the us and the them. I think that's the way we're headed. So I'll just share my story. I try not to go on and on for too long, but I'm the mother of 2 kids, and my youngest, Kristen, was his name when he was born. That was his given name by his parents. Had a lot of distress in his young life. And in elementary school, and a lot of what Alicia said, I have to say, is very familiar. He didn't connect. I'm going to refer to him in his now pronoun. He didn't connect with the girls and always played, in the neighborhood with the boys, and how much of that was just because that was who lived in the neighborhood. I'm not sure. At the time we thought, well, maybe it's because there are all boys in the neighborhood, and he went to early he started school when he was 3 because he had a speech delay, so he was able to be in a early education class, and that was all boys. So we weren't sure what it was, whether it was, that nature or nurture that I heard mentioned. But over time, he continued to not really fit in. Signed him up for Girl Scouts, and that didn't work very long. And actually, he wanted to play football, and did with the Youth Football League. And that lasted about a year when everybody else got bigger and stronger, and he didn't. And then he started to skate. and found skating to be a comfortable place. And youth hockey leagues are actually co-ed when you're young. So he was actually able to, skate with boys and girls and fit in. So in elementary, he started to talk about, he actually started to have some suicide ideation and talk about not being, good enough, because I think he felt that not fitting in, was having a hard time finding a place in school with his, other peers. So we started the course of trying to find a clinician, a therapy person that could help and to identify what was the distress. And I think we started when he was 7. And we didn't get somebody that was able to recognize what was going on until he was 13. 6 years it took. And I can only say how grateful I am as to the changes that have happened over these many years. So this actually, so he went into middle school in the year 2000, just to give you a time frame. Went into middle school in 2000 and was leaving, graduating from 8th grade in 2003. And that's when we found the therapist that was able to identify that our kid was transgender. And my husband and I, and we all just kind of looked at each other because we were all there together with this therapist that had been, recommended to us, and was like, well, what's that? Back in 2003, I didn't have a clue. I had heard the word once before because one of his guidance counselors in middle school, because during middle school, I'll just advance the story, he was dressing as a boy and shaving his hair, which, for a person named Kristen, it was not connecting. So what the one guidance counselor did say to me, I think Kristen might be transgender. And it just went, at the time, it just went right over my head because he was acting out in all kinds of, middle school, probably inappropriate, probably boy behavior ways, and we thought it was all about sexuality and sexual development. So middle school was kind of hell. So we went, he started to get called lesbian and started to have name calling and bullying in middle school. And so once we found the therapist that was able to help us recognize that he was transgender, we were like, eureka, like Alicia referred to. It was like, there's a name for this, and we just got right on board right away, and we were just really fortunate to be connected to all kinds of clinicians and professionals that understood what was going on for our kid. And thank goodness that somebody knew. And so my husband and myself, we just did all sorts of research to get as much information as we could so that we could help and be supportive. And so during high school, he transitioned. And high school was rough. And, he managed to get himself to school. He managed to be on distinction for 4 years. And I have no idea how he did it, but he did. And I particularly appreciated your talking about, being able to, who are you telling the story, or, who knows the story. And we didn't know the suffering that he was having during high school. We had no idea, all the bullying and, just because he didn't look, as people expected. And we didn't know it until later. So we supported him, and he transitioned, and he transitioned medically. So transgender is really just a term of giant umbrella that covers, like you talked about, so many different, everybody has a different idea who happens to be trans or gender variant or gender nonconforming, gender queer. There's all kinds of language, and it's not easy to keep up with it. And even everybody in the community has a different opinion about language. So and I am just this cisgender white mummy sitting up here trying to share her story. But anyway, so he did. He transitioned, and we were hoping, and he was thrilled, and we were all thrilled. And when he was able to take testosterone, which he did, he was thrilled, and we celebrated, his new birthday when he took his first dose, and he surgically transitioned also, and he wrote his college application process about this transition. And I've shared it in publications, and I didn't bring it with me tonight, but he talked about, his struggle about when he went off to college, what would he do? Would he share this, or would he not share this? What to do? And he talked about if he did share it and he had, was rejected, that he really feared for his life. And so it was really a very powerful essay. He started at LaSalle College in Newton, and got through the first semester, and he only got halfway through the second semester, and because he still didn't feel like he fit in. So it was that, I can't tell his story exactly, but my sense is that his internal distress, even though you medically or surgically or socially or however you present yourself or come to terms with yourself, it's not like a magic bullet. And for young people, they often think that that's all going to be the magic bullet. And I remember an older transgender woman sharing with me, "Oh dear, Marcia, this is for life." So it's a transition for life and an adjustment for life. And it's a process, and it just carries on. So so we didn't give him any trouble. You said, okay, take a time out, whatever you need. And unfortunately, he got introduced to drugs. He chose to use some drugs. And he was kind of an all or nothing at all kind of a kid from the get-go. And because not only was he trans, he had other things about him. His personality, he's very impulsive. It wasn't just his transhood that made him be a person. So he unfortunately got introduced to heroin, and he died of a heroin overdose when he was 20 in 2009. And that was the first year we came here, when the topic was gay. And because during middle school we thought perhaps that's what we were dealing with. was somebody who was, maybe it was a sexuality question, but no. So anyway, so he passed away in 2009. But my husband and I, the whole time, just got really involved and connected, and we felt and hoped that our connectedness to the community, because that was one of the things the therapist really wanted for him to do, was to connect to people in the community. And he didn't, and he wouldn't. He was very stubborn. And so my husband and I felt, well, if we model some of this connectedness, maybe this will, rub off on him. But it didn't. And but we got really connected, and he saw that, and he saw our acceptance, and he saw other people in the community. It's not like he didn't know anybody. I mean, he did connect with NaGLY, and he was quite a dancer. So we'd go to all the dances. So we began the work on the legislation, the last piece of legislation for trans rights. And actually, we actually began with the fight for marriage back then in 2004. So, we stuck with it, and CJ passed away in 2009, and the bill passed. They passed the bill in 2011, and it went into law in 2012. So now we're working on getting this last piece finished, and which they stripped out, which we could have had last time around, but they didn't have enough nerve at the State House to make it be a complete package. So, one other piece. So the marriage piece, we left our church. So not only were we fighting in the community for rights, but in our faith tradition, which was Catholic. So when the fight for marriage was happening, we got very involved with that. And when they were trying to take it away, and we joined Dignity Boston. So I'm a member at Dignity Boston, which is a Catholic, progressive, inclusive Catholic for GLBT and allies and families. So, my last thing will be that we just went down as a group called Equally Blessed. We went down to Philadelphia when the Pope came, and we wore our Equally Blessed T-shirts, which were not World Meeting of Family T-shirts, and we did our best to represent the LGBTQ alphabet soup community when the Pope visited. So I'll stop there. I've spoken way too long, so thank you.
And as I said, there'll be time for questions at the end. So after the three speak, I'm going to have them all come sit up here so you can ask some questions. But our next speaker is one of our own NSCC students, Gianni Lara. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. No response? No? Okay. Oh, thank you. Gosh, it's nice to know you guys are awake. All right. So, well, firstly, I have this nice projection here. And I know these are personal anecdotes, and there is a personal reason for all of this, I swear. It'll be a very, very small history lesson here, and I feel humbled to have historians among me. Don't judge me too harshly. But I focused my efforts today to dispel a lot of the common misconceptions. I faced a lot of questions. Believe it or not, I'm very open to questions for later. But I find a lot of the misconceptions I've met across have always kind of been, well, straightforward to this generation. I get a lot of questions. Is this a new fad? Why is this such a new thing? Why are young people talking about this thing that I've never heard about a lot of? So I created this presentation specifically to kind of illustrate it's not very new. It's actually quite old. And I did this specifically to the respect to our own country. we are a new country. And I feel the best way for us to relate to this is to understand our own connections to this, the history to the United States. And we have this pretty flag here for it. So as illustrated earlier, the two-spirited comments, I love the fact that it was brought up earlier. So it all started prior to the 1800s and the Native Americans here. And as was mentioned previously, it is supposed to be a concept that's meant to be two-spirited. And they do have actual, again, I wouldn't be able to pronounce this, so don't judge me too harshly. But the Berdaches, which were the female to male, and the passing woman were male to female. And they would switch, again, gender ideal, how we operate, how we function, how we behave. They would switch that sort of role. And they had names for it. It was a concept that was understood even then. So, interesting topic on that. In the 1800s, still a huge concept, believe it or not. So Joseph Lobdell specifically lived his entire life as a male, almost his entire life to the very end, but was incarcerated right before the end by finding out that he was actually physically female. Before that, he did actually marry. And I find that astounding because, again, sexuality, we have a lot of ideals about how we're supposed to operate, intergender norms, etc. And stuff like that I thought was really interesting. And specifically, during the American Civil War, we all know we had a lot of help for that. But specifically, there were 240 recorded people who were assigned female at birth that wore traditional men's clothing, and some that even chose to live out those lives. And the picture actually depicted here is of Albert Cashier, one of the most infamous ones. Did a lot of really great work in terms of heroism, but in particular, lived out his entire life as a male after the war. And then, of course, in writing, we have Jenny June, who wrote the autobiography of Androgyny and the Female Impersonators. And this specifically, I thought was really rare. It not only was a first-person testimony about the earliest 20th century of transgender person, but also the words were used. And I thought this was a little interesting, if not been used more derogatory in newer times. But the term fairy was used a lot in Androgyny. I find we do mention female, male, and going back and forth between the two, but there is always gender fluid. There's even those that consider themselves agender, which they prefer no gender to define themselves. And I just thought the concept of that was interesting too. And then, of course, we have the early 1900s when things really started to boil up. So the German physician did coin transsexual as a term in a journal. So that was very more specified. And we did start to have a lot more specifications of people coming out as transgender later on in their lives. Obviously, these are people who had to hide the fact they were transgender, such as Billy Tipton, who was a notable American jazz musician and band leader. And interesting enough, his own adopted son didn't realize that his father was actually physically female. And then, of course, pictured here as Christine Georgian, who was in 1952, became the first widely publicized person to have undergone sex reassignment surgery. And in this case, it was male to female. And we can see actually the before and after picture. Of course, she was denied a marriage license. She was very open about being the fact that she was transgender. And when she attempted to marry her husband at the time, or fiance, her fiance actually lost his job. A lot of discrimination has always followed us in history. This is nothing new. Discrimination is a very old topic, actually. But I just think that's interesting that we still have history now where that concept isn't completely ignored, or we see now that we can still be discriminated for jobs. There's, in fact, been bills sent out specifically for this. The fact that we can have people who are transgender now and denied jobs. I'm sure you understand Massachusetts. We are more inclusive to that, but of course, the rest of the country isn't as. So that still hasn't changed awful as much as we'd like. And then, of course, the mid-1900s, when Virginia Prince began publishing a journal for equal dress called Transvestia. In fact, this magazine got an awful amount of attention, some good, some bad. But I thought it was interesting that they were able to found the Hose and Heels Club for cross-dressers. And then one of the first recorded transgender riots in the US history took place in the Compton cafeteria riot. And it was specifically because they denied the allowance of transgender individuals into the area. As this is noted here, it was quite the riot. They actually smashed the glass and the area. And sorry, one moment. Okay, the mouse is working. Sorry. And of course, we're all very familiar with the Stonewall riots of 1969 in New York. These riots were widely considered to have begun the LGBT right movements, and some of the bigger transgender activists in there were Sylvia River and Miss Major Griffin Gracie, who were among those individuals who started the riots, and not only started the riots, planned the actual riots themselves. Now, late 1900s, this is getting a lot closer to now. I'm sure we might have actually recalled, I'm sure some people were actually alive during some of this. Renee Richards, the New York Supreme Court ruled in favor against the U.S. Teen Association, so she was allowed to play. She's depicted at the top there. And I can actually point with this. And over here, we actually have Lou Sullivan, who founds the FTM International, that's Female to Male Association. And he's very specifically renowned because of the fact that he was very open about being gay. And again, that misconception with sexuality and gender identity, the fact that we think the two coincide together all the time, isn't particularly true. And then, of course, on the bottom, I could put an entire list of all the people who have lost their lives coming out as transgender, or even just for knowing transgender individuals. But the three below here, I think, were some of the most particularly well-renowned. So we have in the middle, Brandon Tina, back in 1993, was brutally murdered. There is a movie depicting it. It's an Academy Award winning. It's called Boys Don't Cry. I recommend it, not to the faint of heart. It is a very graphic depiction, but again, as is life. And then, of course, we have Rita Hester. She's the African-American woman on here on the left in 1998. She was actually found in Boston, murdered. And she is more well-renowned, known because specifically we have the Day of Remembrance because of her. On November 20th, we celebrate that day in silence of all those that died before and after. And it's specifically supposed to be for transgender individuals. And of course, the most interesting I felt was Barry Winchell, 1999. He's on the far right there with the American flag. He himself was not transgender. I feel sometimes that we don't reflect on this as a subject that impacts individuals, not just themselves, but the people associated with them. He was killed by his officers, his officers that he knew, his friends, his own people, specifically for being found to be married to an individual who was transgender. And then, of course, as the 1900s continue, we have so much more going on for transgender individuals. Obviously, the American Psychiatric Association started identifying a gender identity disorder. Still to this day, I believe we still use terms like that, dysphoria, etc., in terms of talking about with health insurance. And I know we talked a little bit about that medically. The first national march on Washington for lesbian and gay rights was held in Washington. And again, some of the bigger individuals that helped plan that meeting and helped set that movement were themselves transsexual. And then, of course, we have the early 2000s. Now, I know Caitlyn Jenner was brought up, and I have absolutely appreciated her impact on the media. I had a hairdresser the other day tell me, because I decided to speak to them about it, tell me how much she learned about how sexuality had nothing of an impact upon gender identity. And for once, I didn't have to lecture, so I was like extremely impressed. But at the same time, I can't help but feel she hasn't done enough for the community that I could consider her a good representation. Unlike Laverne Cox, who is, well, amazing, but more to the point, she has founded some of the best movements. She's made huge progression in terms of media coverage. And not only is she speaking about herself, she goes on behalf of others all the time. In fact, I think one of the most difficult things for the media to comprehend is how to question individuals such as ourselves. And she's had to step in a few times to correct them on the way that they speak, how to be politically correct. And just to have her be as active as she is within the community and representation is a lifesaver. Like, she's just amazing. But also, we do have a few other fun things that have happened in the past few years. Of course, the National Center for Transgender Equality was founded in 2003, and America's Top Model featured a trans woman in 2008. And of course, in 2012, Miss Universe opens competition to trans contestants, which was amazing. But of course, to the man himself, I have to give it to Obama. I'm sorry, but first president to ever say the word transgender in a speech. I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with Leila Acorn. She was an individual who committed suicide at one point because she thought she was too old to transition. She had been told misinformation by her parents, who weren't extremely supportive of her at the time. And it was a huge wake-up call for some individuals who consider this to be less than an infliction. They consider it, again, a life choice, like if we chose to be displeased with ourselves. And he very much specifically targeted the whole ideal of correcting this type of behavior. And for that, I mean, I cannot even say how much amazingness that brought. But he specifically has signed hate crime legislation to ban discrimination on the basis of gender identity and sexual orientation by federal contractors. And of course, I did bring up the fact that he has quietly applied his power of executive branch to make it easier for transgender people to update their passports, to obtain health insurance, and it's all under the Affordable Care Act, and to get treatment even at Veterans Administration facility and seek access to public school restrooms and sports program. And this is actually a dated PowerPoint. This is a little while ago. But President Obama did make LGBT history again by advocating foster and adoptive parents be chosen without regard to sexual orientation or gender identity. But more to the point of this actual presentation. So firstly, I'm humbled today to even be speaking here, to be speaking among individuals who are so brave and to be speaking honestly to an audience. But at the same time, I'm also humbled by my humanity. I understand this is not a new topic, and I want to bring that to the public more so because I personally cannot fathom the fact that we continue this sort of ignorance. And we will always continue some sort of ignorance and discrimination. That's just our capacity as individuals, but we need to learn to adapt. And I brought this presentation specifically to attention because my own father was the one that brought up the topic. He's the one who brought up, well, this is going to change, this is never going to keep. And of course, I couldn't help but at first, believe in that a little bit, because I, for my own time, really disbelieved I was going to go through with it. For the longest time, I knew exactly what this was, and I didn't live a very straightforward lifestyle when I was growing up. I didn't yes, I had friends that were boys, but I also had friends that were girls. Yes, I played around in the mud a lot. I know my way around construction tools, but I can also do my little sister's hair better than anyone, and makeup, by the way. So I never really fit into any sort of norms, and I thought I could be okay representing as a female for as long as I did. And I had a health scare one day. Obviously, I'm here. But I had a health scare one day, and I really believed at one point that I was going to die a female. And that actually put enough strength in me to transition. So specifically, I stand here, it's almost been a year on hormone therapy. And I can't believe the difference that it has honestly made. For anyone who is considering or knows people who are considering, it makes a huge difference. You think at the time you can get through it, you're gonna be fine, you can ignore the fact that you have these feelings, and it never truly works out. It's going to build up inside you, and you can't even understand how great you're gonna feel later. But at the same time, I also know how these people felt growing up, having to hide all of this. I don't present myself as a transgender when I meet people. That is, I'm not waving the flag around. I'm not telling people, oh, by the way, I was born female, just to let you know. And that's, I think, the bigger part of this. I personally just want to live my life as a male. That's how I present. That's how I speak to people when I'm at work, when I'm at school, etc. But that's my personal choice, and not everyone is going to have that same choice. Some people will feel differently about this. But again, if you take anything from me speaking here today, I think the whole topic is that this is not new, and we have a history of aggression and discrimination, and only with our acceptance and understanding can we move forward. I mean, these issues are not going to resolve themselves, and again, they're not new issues, but they're certainly not all gone. So, thank you for having me.
So we have one last speaker for the night, and if Gianni and Marcia, if you wouldn't mind sitting on the stage too, so when Steve's done, we can have questions for everyone. I'm pleased to introduce Steve Harrington, who is the director of NaGLY.
Good evening. Thanks for everyone for sticking around. I will be as short as I possibly can because it's well after my bedtime. For those of you who don't know NaGLY, it stands for the North Shore Alliance of Gay, Lesbian, Bisexual, and Transgender Youth. We have been around for 23 years, and for the first 22 years, we were in the basement of the Universalist Church in Salem. We had 3 hours a week to accomplish everything that we needed to do. We would open the door, unlock the door, the youth would come in, grab the chairs, we would open bags of chips and soda, do our programming, and then everything had to be put back. It wasn't until this last year, we were very fortunate to have been awarded a grant from TripAdvisor, so please make all your trip plans on TripAdvisor. We were awarded a very, very generous grant, a 3-year grant, and what it has allowed us to do is move into our own permanent location for the first time. We now have 5,200 square feet of our own space in the Museum Place Mall, which is that I wouldn't say questionable, but it doesn't have any chain stores in it, let's put it that way, in downtown Salem. It has absolutely transformed our organization. We now have a youth lounge, we have a library with computer access, we have Wi-Fi throughout, we have a kitchen, we have a huge meeting room, we do HIV and hepatitis C testing, we have a room just for our supplies. We have an enormous room that is just for clothing donations so that the youth can come in and take whatever clothes they want. As far as NaGLY is concerned, it is a youth-run organization. We're part of a loosely connected group of 13 organizations throughout the state. BAGLY is sort of an umbrella group, but we are a separate 501c3, a separate incorporated entity in the state of Massachusetts. The youth plan the programming. They get together once a month and they decide what topics they'd like to discuss. We meet on Tuesday nights, traditionally, and our topics range from the serious, safe sex, drug use, coming out, bullying, to the more mundane and joyous, like Irish drag, or poetry slam, or game night, or movie night. 2 weeks ago, we did ecological ways that we can help the earth. This last week was HIV prevention. So what's very, very fascinating is watching youth come in who are slump-shouldered, speaking very quietly and are very unsure of themselves. And after 6 months, you see these youth with their shoulders back and their head high, and they're applying for a peer leader position so they can run these meetings. It's an amazing transformation with these youth. When we first found this space in the Museum Place Mall, it's a double-wide storefront, so we have 2 huge picture windows, and some of the youth were a little concerned about being so visible. You can't see any of the meeting rooms or anything, but you do have to walk into this very visible space. What we have found and what we were hoping to find is that having this visible space subconsciously allows them to say, I have nothing to hide, and has made a very big difference in the attitude of the organization at large. The other aspect of having our own private space is that we do get a chance to cook meals periodically and serve them. For those of you who ever went to Mildred's Cafe on Lewis Street, when they went out of business, we bought all of their dishware so that we can now serve a family-style meal with real dishes and real silverware and have a family-style meal. So one of the things that we stress is as soon as you come through those doors, we are a family. It is a non-judgmental, safe, and recently we've adopted a new word. It is a brave space. Many organizations refer to safe spaces. And recently, at one of our network meetings, we talked about using the term brave space, which immediately, to me, said so much more than just a safe space. We are a brave space, and we've had the youth create a big banner for that. Again, as we've gotten our funding and as we've gotten this space, we have expanded. We now have drop-in hours on Friday afternoon for 6 hours. We have incorporated a trans-specific group that meets every other Wednesday. This past Monday, I am so excited. You have no idea how excited I am to announce that we had our first middle school support group. We are only... It was amazing and very, very difficult for me to talk to a therapist or a parent or a teacher or guidance counselor and who said, I've got a 6th grader, I've got an 11-year-old, what do I do? And for me to say, there's nothing out there at all. Out Metro West recently started the first non-GSA middle school group, and we are now the 2nd in the state. The amazing thing, unfortunately, I was unable to make the meeting, but the 2 adults who monitored it said it was the biggest joyous occasion that they'd seen. I mean, pretty much everybody was in tears, particularly the parents, because for many of these parents, this is the first time they had seen their child happy. It was just an amazing experience. One woman, just before she left, handed us a check for $1,000. That's how much it meant to her to see her child happy. Before you get the wrong idea, we're not loaded with money. So if you do want to make a donation, please don't hesitate. Our grant is for 3 years. We've used up one of those years. So we have 2 years left to raise this money. We have, coming up on Monday, we will start our first PFLAG chapter. That is at 7 o'clock. We have an over 17 movie night once a month. We have workshops. We've had workshops on everything from knitting and sewing to decorating to any number of aspects. Coming up, we will be having guest speakers. We have Pam Garamone, who was the president of Boston PFLAG, coming in. We have Candace Wheeler, who wrote an amazing, amazing book called My Daughter He. For those of you who are interested in reading a parent's take on going through this, that's a wonderful book. along with a book called Becoming Nicole, also written by a parent. So we are growing, and if you can spread the word, that will make all the difference in some people's lives. And it's an amazing, amazing organization to see these kids. I'm not supposed to use that term. You're supposed to say youth. But pretty much everybody here is a kid to me. To watch them come in and find a place of their own where they can relax and be themselves and not worry. One of the amazing things, when we started the boutique in the back where we have all the clothes, we thought it was going to be just a very small area of this large room. We got so many donations that we had to stop donations. And one of the benefits for trans youth in particular is that for many of them, they are either rejected at home, or finding clothes or going out shopping is very difficult for them. So they can come to our location and try on whatever clothes they want and take them home. They can be themselves for the first time. I just had something in my mind, and it just, if anybody saw it fly over there, if you can remind me what it was, that would be great. I just don't remember. Help me out. Yeah, I don't remember what it was. The youth are so used to me being old. I went into the lounge one day, and they were playing something, and I said, "Is that a Game Boy?" I will never live that down. But I feel so blessed to be able to work with this organization, not having children of my own. I feel like I have 50. NaGLY does have an age spectrum, 14 to 23. We do have an alumni group, and now we have the middle school group, so we're really expanding. We have a Facebook page, which has our calendar on it. It's North Shore LGBT Youth is the keyword. We also have a website that we finally, after a year, have gotten control over, www.nagly.org. We love allies at our meetings. What we do say for a youth, for the first time a youth comes to the meeting, they are allowed to bring their parent or guardian or friend or whatever, and for that first meetings, they can stay for the whole meeting. And what that allows is the youth to feel comfortable, and for the parent to feel comfortable that they've left their child someplace safe. Then we ask that the parents or guardians drop the youth off and pick them up, and that allows the youth to talk about them when they're gone. The other aspect of having it in the mall is that for youth who are not out to their families, they don't have to say where they're going. They can say, we're going to the movies, or just drop me off at the mall, and they can come in and then call their parents when they're done. So I welcome any other questions about the organization. We do have a table in the back with photos of our new space and with our outreach coordinator, Alex, holding fort back there. Please avail yourself of the resources back there and spread the word that NaGLY is here and growing. Thank you so much for having me tonight.
This is for NaGLY. So, first of all, I love the fact that you guys use the term brave place instead of safe place, because like you said, it just gives them more empowerment just to be there. It's not just they're protecting from society. Now they can feel brave. So my question is, do you guys do any preparation for like how do they how do they deal with the discrimination that they're going to deal with in society? How do you address that? How do you prepare them for it? How do you, like, what? How is it discussed? I guess, like, is it discussed at all?
How is which? I missed the middle part.
Sorry, like the discrimination that they may face in society. How do you prepare them for it? Since this is a brave place, and out there might not be as brave.
I think the best way we can do it is by example. We have a hierarchy of staff members. So we do have adult staff, we have adult staff interns, but we also have peer leaders and peer leader interns. And those youth go through training, and they're the ones that run the meetings. So I think from their confidence level and from their demeanor, that the youth can absorb a lot of the confidence that they need. We do sometimes have programming that specifically addresses discrimination or bullying or coming out, and ways to get through that process healthily. As an anecdote, one of the things that they were also concerned about, the fountain outside of NaGLY is sometimes filled with youth who used to harass LGBTQ people. What we found was through a series of events, some of those youth have come in and availed themselves of the boutique, because most of them are homeless, which reminds me of what I was going to say. But and what has happened is when those youth come in and take some of the clothes, they have been so appreciative and so thankful and so kind and considerate that they are now allies of NaGLY, and that's been a really wonderful. And I think it's examples like that that let them learn how to face the discrimination.
One question for all three of you. I was assaulted over here in Salem about 8 months ago to almost a year. The cops didn't do nothing. They just took it like nothing happened. The person, nothing was done to him. The place that I was assaulted in erased the video, and on top of it, they were laughing about it. I was left on the floor 45 minutes, unconscious, bleeding. Nothing was done. I'm a transgender too. I've been 3.5 years already in treatment. I'm almost finishing. Hopefully by summer I'll get my SRS and everything done. But that's how it's going. And if Sundays are good, I could volunteer over there. I got nothing to do. And that's how I am. Asking. I even went to help to the mayors. They turned me down in Salem to see that the system in the police department is bad. And for transgenders, it's a no-go. We try to look for help, they look the other way. Like we don't even exist. We get assaulted, nothing's done. We are the ones that are blamed for the problem, not the person that caused the problem. That's how bad it is.
Was this in Salem? Because Salem, we have found, we've been very fortunate to be in Salem, because as you know, the mayor has been very, very supportive of us. We are working with the police department. We've signed a memorandum of understanding to do trainings with them to make them more sensitive to the issues in the community. So hopefully we'll get some progress with that. I'm surprised that you didn't get better service from the mayor's office, but we are working directly with the police department to try to make it more sensitive to the issues within our community.
I'd just like to add, there is a hate crime law in Massachusetts that was part of that bill that we passed in 2012. So you may have some recourse. I don't know if you want to take some action or file some sort of a complaint, but GLAD, G-L-A-D, you may want to talk to somebody there. And MTPC, I know that they're looking for stories. I know that we're looking for stories of discrimination that isn't handled correctly, and that's exactly the kind of testimony that they need to hear at the State House. So do not be afraid to tell your story. I mean, I know that it's easy for me to sit here and say that because I'm sure that you're concerned about any kind of, exactly, repercussion if you were to speak out. So, yeah, it's awful.
Okay, and we're running way over time, so I would like to thank these wonderful people. Maybe there'll be some time to chat with them after.